Welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series from 8:30 to 9 a.m. to help small businesses. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments of the live feed. If you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and small business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we'll be running a poll, so please do engage with it, and I'll reveal the results at the end. And make sure you're registered for the QuickBooks free annual conference, QuickBooks Connect. Look out for the link in the chat. Taking place virtually on the 9th and 10th of March, the event brings together entrepreneurs, small business owners and accountants together to grow, learn and connect. Thank you so much for tuning in this morning. My name's Sally Haslewood and my business is called Mumbler. What I'm going to talk about this morning is everything social media and how to nurture your communities on social media. And I'm going to run through and give you my top tips on how to create an engaged following on social media. So first of all, a little bit about me and my business. So Mumbler's been around just over 10 years and it began just as a Facebook group. It was never meant to be a business and it was purely to serve my own purposes, which was to make friends locally and find out what was going on for families. Now, fast forward 10 years, we've now actually got a social media following of over 210,000 people. We have around 3 million people visiting our websites every year. And the social media following in particular, and the people that come to Mumbler, our audience, have real value to us. Not only are they our own community, in the early days it did help me meet other parents and find out what was going on locally. But over the years, obviously we did evolve into a business, and the community that we have has value because people recognise that a engaged social media community has value in terms of being an authentic audience. It's an audience who trust our reputation because we've built them up slowly and the right way. So what I'm going to do today is tell you all about that. So Mumbler is a parenting community. We're completely free for parents to use, and each Mumbler website, we've got 19 of them now, covers what goes on locally and make sure that families have everything that they need to know to make their family life a little bit easier. Now, we're very strong on Facebook, the vast majority of our followers on Facebook, but we also have followers on Twitter, LinkedIn, and increasingly over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, Instagram. So I guess the question is for all businesses, do you need social media? And I think the answer is in 2022, absolutely yes. There's no excuse for you not having a social media presence. The reason being, your customers, before they even engage with you, will Google you. It's just what people do these days. And if they look online and they cannot find your presence, it raises question marks, and potentially you're losing businesses before they've even losing customers, before they've even spoken to you. So you do need the social media accounts. And the first tip that I'd give you is to create them all on all of the major platforms, even if you're not intending to use them. And the reason why I'd suggest that is because if you don't create your own social media accounts, there is a danger that somebody else might take your accounts, potentially a competitor or just somebody else who gets there first. So I think it's important to sign up for the accounts because they're completely free. There's no cost, even if you're just intending to sit on them for a while. But certainly on the major ones, so I'm talking Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and then depending on what your business is, you might want to go on other ones, things like TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest, that sort of thing. So what is social media? Looking at it from my point of view, it's the social side of it that's incredibly important. In my mind now, social media it's a very modern way of doing word of mouth marketing. Back in the day before the internet, just about remember it, you'd be chatting to somebody stood next to the bus stop, or in my case with my audience, stood in the school playground, and having that interaction about where have you been, what's been good, did you go somewhere, was the food good, that sort of thing. And it's very casual interaction. It's not the hard sell, it's conversational. And done well, that's what social media is. It's just modern word of mouth marketing. And in order to make that work for you, what you need to do is build your audience, your following. You need to really nurture them and look after them and give them good quality content because they deserve it. You need to engage with them. It's not a one-way conversation. It absolutely is not a hard sell. It's a very gentle conversation. And you need to protect them. And by protect, I mean protect them from spam. We need to be giving our followers good quality content all the time because they deserve it. They have taken time out of their daily life to make sure that to come and see what you've got to say. So it's our job as business owners to make sure that we're giving them good quality information. So when you've created all of the accounts on all your major platforms, and this doesn't need to take time, and it certainly doesn't cost any money. And when I'm talking about creating this internet presence, if you were creating a website, if you haven't got one already or an app, these things cost an awful lot of money and time and expertise. Social media accounts can be done by yourself as a small business owner. If you could give yourself a half day, or an evening or a weekend, you could easily get them set up fairly quickly. So before you even begin posting, you need to really think about a few questions. And this is something that I do periodically, and I think as a small business owner, it's useful to do periodically, maybe once a quarter, once every 6 months, is really think about who your audience are. And what I mean by this is I'm a pen and paper girl, so I like to sit there and write it down, but I really give my ideal customer a personality. I give them a gender. I think about who they are in terms of their age, their demographic, what's going on about them. And it makes it a lot easier for me if I've got that visualization about who my person is. And it might not just be one person, there might be multiple people, but once you've got a clear impression in your mind of who your ideal customer is, you can then figure out where they hang out online. And one of the things that I'd definitely think about is where they hang out online is so vitally important, because we're only limited on time. Time is our biggest resource that can run away with us. So we need to really focus our efforts where they're important. And so if, for example, say you are a corporate accountant and your customers are other businesses, which if you're watching this on QuickBooks, it's quite likely, I would suggest that your customer is probably going to hang out on LinkedIn. It's probably not worth your time putting together a cute TikTok video or being on Snapchat. Conversely, if you're a product maker that makes something for young teenagers or tweens, then yes, very much TikTok and Snapchat are going to be your native platforms, and maybe with a bit of Instagram. So it's really thinking about who your customers are and where they hang out. So once you've thought about your customer and where they hang out, how do you really go about what's the nitty-gritty about creating good social media presence? Well, the first thing that I recommend is lurking. And what I mean by this is once you're on the platform, you need to spend a bit of time just watching and learning and following other accounts. And the sort of accounts that I'm thinking about are your competitors. What are they doing? If you're geographically based, so in a particular town or area, follow other businesses in that area, follow hashtags in that subject matter, and I'll touch on hashtags in a second. But you need to watch and learn so that you can learn the tone for that particular platform. And the reason why I'm saying that is because different social media channels have different tones. So I would suggest that you definitely need to think about, for example, on LinkedIn, it's a very much more business-minded tone, the way that people speak. Whilst it has changed, the pandemic's made people change, and I would say that LinkedIn has definitely softened. It has got a more business vibe. An example for me would be if I was popping out a piece of content, say, a good walk where you can get a hot chocolate. I would put this out as a blog, and then I would promote it on my social media channels. So on Facebook, I'd be making sure that my users know there's a brand new blog. It's about days out where you can get a nice hot chocolate. I might repurpose the same content, so I don't need to create brand new. But if I was putting it out on LinkedIn, I would put it out, but I'd just top and tail it with a different message, which might be, I've put out this blog about walks. I've focused on 3 businesses to make sure that their customers know that they do a great hot chocolate. Really pleased to be working with the business, 3 businesses. And if I put the same piece of content out on Instagram, again, you now can put a little link in your Instagram story, which is a relatively new feature. So I could link to the blog, but also it'd be a more casual me out having a hot chocolate on a walk, snapshot photo. So the tone of voice is just subtly different. So lurk around and learn what the tone of voice is and follow the correct accounts so you can build up a picture of who your followers are. And then that goes into my second point, which is researching. So when you're researching when you're researching on a social media platform, hashtags is a really good thing to research. And what I mean by this, hashtags, it's a search function in its purest form, and it's searching by subject matter. So if you pop a hashtag in, it's basically indicating to that platform that this piece of content relates to this subject. So what I do to make it a bit easier and quicker is I have a list of hashtags on my phone on notes, so I can copy and paste them. I always add unique ones depending on what I'm particularly posting about, but there's probably between 5 and 10 that I always put in my content to brand it as Mumbler content. But so do your research, find out what your hashtags are, and make sure you use them. So we've lurked, we've researched. then it's about engagement. And this is where social media really is a two-way street. Engaging with your audience means you're not just on send. We're not doing hard sales. This is not what it's about. It's about building up rapport, making those connections, and you need to be generous with your time. The more you give, the more you receive. So if somebody invites you to partake in their social media channels, do it, because you can do the same in reverse. It might be a question and answer session, something like that. But you really do need to give more than you get. So we've lurked, we've researched, we've engaged, we're ready to post. What I would say on this is start small. I know how awkward it is when you see yourself online, when you hear yourself online, but your social media followers, they're buying into you. You really need to think about the social side of this. They don't want the corporate message. They're not looking for an extension of your website. What they want to see is your personality, what goes on behind the scenes. You need to reward your followers with those little insights, make them feel part of your gang, part of your community. But start small. You don't have to go straight into doing a Facebook Live or a YouTube video like this. You can take a photo, you can maybe build up, you can do a pre-recorded video, and when you're used to it, yes, put out some lives, go for it. And all I can say on that is it does get easier. I know how cringy it is to start with, but the more you do it, as with anything, the easier it gets. So we've lurked, we've researched, we've engaged, and we've posted. And then you need to reflect. And what I mean by this is you need to be looking back on what's worked out. Now, each social platform is slightly different, but they've all got insights. And what these insights are is numbers to tell you who looked at your stuff, who engaged with your stuff. Did it go down well? Did you post at the right time of day? So you need to reflect back and you need to see what worked. And I would say maybe a monthly basis. Again, we're all business owners, so we don't have endless times unless you're lucky enough to have a social media manager who'll be doing this for you. But you need to reflect back and see what worked. If you know that your followers are online at 10 a.m. on Tuesday morning, that's when you need to be putting your content out. So reflect back and do more of the same. And if something really bombed, maybe don't do that again. So hopefully you're feeling confident about posting on social media. So there's just a couple of other quick fire tips that I want to give you before we go into questions. So first of all, it's definitely a two-way conversation. This is not a hard sales platform on social media. You need to nurture your community, protect them, and give them good quality content, things that they're interested in. In practical terms, make use of the profile pictures. Every single platform has got a piece of real estate at the top, a banner, and a profile picture. You need to make use of this. This is the best use of space. It's free. Get a picture on there. And if you're not a graphic designer yourself and you don't have a graphic design team, which a lot of small businesses don't, there's a really great program called Canva online, which is free to use, and it's got the preset sizes for all your different social media channels. So make sure you're using that real estate. Every single social media following has got a biography section where you need to put a short, snappy bit about your business. They're all slightly different, but you can pretty much use the same content on most of them, maybe tweak it slightly, again, depending on the tone of voice. But make sure you're using it. If you're not putting a link in your bio on Instagram or the About Us section on Facebook, you're missing a trick. And talking about the link in bio, here's another little top tip. You can only put one link in your biography on Instagram. But if you've got multiple web addresses that you want to send your customers to, you can use something called Linktree. Again, it's free to use, and it's just a page that you set up where you can put multiple links in, and then you actually link to your Linktree from Instagram. So do that. Consistency is absolutely key. If you've ever listened to anybody do social media talking, or presentations, they will talk about consistency. Now, obviously, your ideal would be that you do it twice a day, every day, but we've all got businesses and lives to run. So, I would say find your vibe and hold yourself to it. So it might just be once a week, it might be twice a week, but diarise it and force yourself to do it. And nowadays, we're all out and about during our working week with our phones in our pockets. Phones are perfectly good. In fact, they are brilliant for taking photos, videos. If you see something that's interesting while you're out and about, you can make a note or you can take a photo and then reflect back on it in your half an hour a week where you've diarised that you're going to do something on social. So just get in the habit of doing it, and you need to hold yourself to account because time runs away with us. And then when you are posting, being authentic is absolutely critical. Businesses have come to social media, as I said earlier on, to get a an authentic tone of voice. They don't want the corporate message. They can go to your website for that. What you need to be doing on social media is giving them that insight, rewarding their following, rewarding the fact that they are taking time out of their day by giving them something unique and giving them that little behind the scenes peek. And it's absolutely fine to repurpose content, because I know as I'm talking, you're possibly thinking, oh gosh, it's one more job to do. It's, I've got to come up with this content. I've got to create engaging content. Well, you can repurpose other people's content. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. As long as you're not passing it over as your own work, you can share other people's posts, take screenshots. As long as as long as you're not trying to pass it off as your own, it's absolutely fine and acceptable to repurpose other people's content, share other people's content, as long as it's interesting and relevant to your follower. I would say never, ever, ever buy followers. I've seen so many accounts over the years where they've obviously paid for followers, and you can sniff it out a mile away, and all it does is make you look unreputable, and it makes people disengage with you. Do not do it. It's so easy to spot from somebody who knows anything about social media. You might have a few posts with 5 likes, and then suddenly you get the next post with 5,000. Like it smells fishy, and it is. Just don't do it. In terms of time management, I realise I'm talking, making your lives a little bit harder. You can schedule. I mean, it's not as good as doing it live, and you certainly need to be responding to people in real life. But if you know that 7 p.m. on a Friday night is when your followers are online, there's nothing wrong with using scheduling tools, things like Hootsuite. But you'll also find with most social media platforms, they've got their own internal scheduling tool. So use those internally, because all of the platforms do prefer their own scheduling tools. So Facebook, now called Meta, you can schedule ahead with that. So do it. But as I say, you do need to respond to questions, and you need to respond to any comments and all comments in real time. And I think that's really important from a manners point of view and an online etiquette point of view. Even, it doesn't have to be chapter and verse, but just a thank you or even an emoji if you really don't have time. But it is very important. And in terms of generating content, my final tip for you would be to look at seasonal calendars. That's a really good way to find interesting content. I would say you don't have to engage with every single what's on day, because some of them won't be relevant for your business. But if it is something like Valentine's Day or Pancake Day, or apparently today's Random Acts of Kindness Day, I think that might be an American one. If it's something that you can bring into your social media thread organically, then yeah, use what's on calendars. So that's about it for me. I've probably bombarded you with information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few questions now. But thank you so much for watching. So first up, we're going to go to Carmen on Twitter, direct message on Twitter. Carmen asked, what was the biggest challenge in the first few years of your business, and how did you overcome it? Well, I think for me personally, the biggest challenge for Mumbler was getting my head around the fact that it started as a hobby, it started as a social media community and evolved into a business. And because of that, there was definitely some, I would say, imposter syndrome. I didn't come from a background of digital marketing. I was something completely different, chartered surveyor. So it was entirely new territory for me. And I had no business experience because I worked as a civil servant. So it was a huge learning curve, and I doubted myself. And I think as I've gone on 10 years down the line, I'm definitely at the stage now where I do trust my own judgment. I've been around the block long enough that even if I maybe don't do things exactly the same way as traditional business people would, I know what's right for my audience. I know what's right for Mumbler, and I've got more confidence in myself. So I'd say it's probably a long-winded way of saying it, but imposter syndrome was probably my biggest challenge. So you're just going to beat it down if that happens again. So thank you for that question, Karen. Next up, we have got Tommy on Facebook Messenger. And Tommy asks, we are on a handful of social media channels, but often find it tricky figuring out what to post about. A lot of our posts get little engagement, but I don't want the channels to be empty. How do you come up with content ideas? That's a great question. So the thing is, Tommy, first of all, you don't need to create new content for every channel. As I said earlier on, you can repurpose one piece of content for multiple channels. You might need to alter the way that it's delivered slightly and the tone of voice and the language that you use. But don't feel like if you're on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, you've got to be producing 3 pieces of content. That's just not the case. I'd say, first of all, don't get too disheartened if a piece of content doesn't land. It happens. We can kill ourselves trying to figure out the algorithm on whichever platform. But let me tell you, first of all, nobody knows the answer other than the powers that be at the platforms. We're all guessing. You can watch online articles and whatnot, maybe with social media experts who'll give you, top tips of the day, what's currently working, that sort of thing. But sometimes they just don't land. So I think what you need to do is just brush it off, move on. When you're reflecting on it, do learn from it. Maybe you've tried putting out a Q&A a few times and your audience just doesn't like it. It's fair enough. Just learn from that and move on. But I think ultimately, content ideas, as I said earlier on, one of the good things, polls seem to be doing well at the moment. I'm seeing them all over the place on LinkedIn particularly, and perhaps your followers, they're lurking around, they don't feel confident to type out a full comment, but if you put a poll out that they can, they're comfortable enough to click an option, asking questions, people love to give advice, so if you can ask a meaningful question to somebody, that will potentially give you ideas and it'll encourage people to engage. But don't beat yourself up so much, and it's fine sharing other people's content. So hopefully that answers you. We will go to Abdul on a Twitter DM. Abdul, I reckon my business may be possible for franchising, but I have no idea where to start. How did you go about it? And what are the first steps I should look into? That is a very good question. I didn't really touch on the fact that Mumbler is franchised, but it is. We've got 19 franchises now across the UK. I think with franchising, go in with your eyes open. There are some very good websites. There's the BFA. There's other websites like that give you a lot of information. For me personally, I took a franchise consultant as somebody. I knew my business, Mumbler, obviously, but I didn't have a clue about franchising. So I sought out a professional who was incredibly helpful in terms of getting me whipped into shape, what information I needed, what things I needed to think about. And there is funding out there as well. You need to look around. I managed to get 50% funded on the franchising expert, which was a huge help because there are a lot of costs involved. But the key thing before you even think about franchising is your first business a complete success, because if it's not a financial success, when you franchise it out and replicate it, these cracks are just going to get bigger. So make sure your first business is watertight before you even think about franchising. So Jane on Facebook Messenger. I like what you said about lurking and researching when it comes to hashtags. How do you find the authentic and engaging ones? A lot of topics have multiple hashtags, some oversaturated and some quiet. Very good question, Jane. So with hashtags, what I tend to do, as I say, I've got my bank of ones that I use regularly, which are particular to me, but then I periodically spend a bit of time researching. And you're quite right, some are oversaturated. So things like, coming up, hashtag Pancake Day, it's going to have millions and millions of users. So if you use that hashtag, the chances are it's not going to bring you in front of a new audience, because you're going to get lost in the mix. So I personally think when you're looking at hashtags and when you type them up, it'll give you a number next to them, and that tells you how many impressions that hashtag's had. I think ideally you want to mix it up. So a few big ones is fine. You never know, it might land. But for me personally, I'm generally looking for hashtags that have got between, I'd say maybe 1,000 and 15,000 impressions. And they're, your golden ones. And actually, the smaller the pool, the better, within reason. You don't want a hashtag that's been used twice because no one's searching for it. But it's finding that little sweet spot in between with hashtags that aren't as big. And particularly if you can, thinking about local hashtags. If you are locally based and you live in a town or a village or an urban area, finding out what the hashtags for that urban area are, because when people are looking, if they're coming to your area and they want to find a business, they very well may look on their town's hashtag. Things like that can land really sweetly. But as with all of these things, it's trial and error. But yeah, I wouldn't spend too much time on the massive ones. I think, if anyone did land on a hashtag Valentine's Day early this week, well done you. But it's unlikely for most of us mere mortals that we would. So moving on to Poppy on Instagram. Well done, Sally, for all you've done to build a brand that helps mums while raising kids. Thank you. As a mum as well, I sometimes find it tricky juggling family life and my business. How do you strike the right work-life balance? Well, first of all, Poppy, thank you for popping the question. I recognise it's probably not the best time for any mums out there because it's in the middle of the school run. So thank you for joining us. What I would say is, honestly, I think work-life balance, it's not a thing. There's no balance. It's a juggle. Sometimes work is on top, sometimes family's on top. And do you know what? That's fine. The best thing about being a small business owner is giving yourself that flexibility. You know, my children do have to learn occasionally. It's hard that mummy has to work, but hopefully I'm teaching them the value of work and building a business. But at the same time, if something goes wrong at school, I can down tools and get out of there and see to the family. And I think in some ways the pandemic has helped. You know, we're all a little bit more comfortable with doing these sort of Zoom calls, Teams meetings, and you know, should a child have walked in now behind me, it's not as mortifying as it would have been 2 years ago. I think society as a whole has sort of caught up and realised that, you know, work isn't everything. It's, you know, a big part of my life, and it's something I'm incredibly proud of. But so are my family. So you know, if the two meet, that's okay. And wherever possible, due to the nature of Mumbler, my children are involved. Gosh, I've had the children out doing reviews for me. They're probably sick of seeing themselves on Instagram and whatnot. And sometimes that in itself is tricky because as my children are getting older, they're not as happy to be splattered all over the internet anymore. And I've got to take their feelings into consideration. And that's absolutely fine. But yeah, it's not a balance. It's a juggle. It's hard, but it's okay. So let's have a little look. Rachel on YouTube. Do you ever worry about your social media channels being closed, hijacked, etc.? And have you got any contingency plans? Honestly, I would say it's not something that I worry about regularly. I have had it, not on social media channels, but years and years and years ago, we had an attack on the websites, and it was awful. You take it personally; it is an invasion. It feels like somebody is you know, attacking you, and it's awful. It's ultimately you've got to do what you can do in terms of website security. You've got to have a very good digital agency or website people behind you, or someone that you can call on in times of need. And whilst it is irritating, set up all of the two-factor authentication. You know, we've got phones now, so it's a fairly easy process to, you know, if they send in a code to check in. And in terms of it being closed, are you talking about being put in Facebook jail, that sort of thing? Do you know what? Yes, it happens. It's annoying. You know, even the biggest social media platforms go down sometimes, and when you come to rely on them, it's, you know, it does feel a little bit like you're working with one hand tied behind your back. But you know what? You move on. You've got to keep these things in perspective, and ultimately, not being too reliant on one platform does help because you can spread the load. Let's have a little look. Next question, Reese on Facebook Messenger. I run a small Facebook group that shares advice for other creative freelancers, and I'm currently investing more time into it, but currently it doesn't make any money. What are the first steps I could be looking into about creating an income stream for it? So this is on a Facebook group. So for me, I think the first thing is I did it, by the sounds of it, just like you're doing, Reese, for the love of it to start with. The passion's got to be there. You know, the audience that you're building, they become your biggest fans, your biggest cheerleaders. So you've got to look after them, and you've got to do it for the right reasons. So if you've got this fantastic group of creative freelancers on there, potentially could you look into monetizing that by becoming almost like an agent for them? It may well be the case that you could offer your services so that if somebody's looking for a particular creative, you know, you could go to your audience, obviously put those into work and maybe put a margin on top of it, something like that. Definitely with a pool of creative freelancers like that, I would say, you know, it is a valuable asset, but you've got to keep think very carefully, and you certainly can't take advantage of the freelancers. There are so many people that have created businesses on the back of Facebook group, but it's got to be done openly, honestly, and authentically. But I would certainly, I want to reflect on that one a little bit more as well, Reese. So if you want more information afterwards, I'm going to have a little think about it and come back with some specific ideas for you that are going to be useful to you, rather than just sort of trying to come up with something off the hook that isn't off the hoof, sorry, that isn't useful. But thank you for that question, Reese. I will get back to you on that. If you drop me a DM, I'll give you in fact, it's on Instagram. If you do at Mumbler_HQ. So the poll results are in. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. So this morning we asked you, how often do you engage with your customers on social media? And here are the results. So 20% of you said daily, which is absolutely fantastic. That's brilliant. 60% said weekly, also very good, particularly when we've got other businesses to run. That's really impressive. 10% of you said monthly. That's the real world. It probably needs to be improved on that. If you don't have the consistency, you're going to lose your followers. You need to really reward them for taking their time out to follow you. And then 10% answered we don't. Well, you need to be creating your social media accounts and doing a little bit better than that. As I say, it's 2022 now. We need to be on social media and we need to have a presence. So thank you so much for engaging with that. That's incredibly useful information. So thank you all for tuning in this morning. If you want to get in touch with me, then do feel free. I mentioned my Instagram account earlier on, but feel free to contact me on Instagram. You can find me at Mumbler_HQ. So coming up on Ask the Expert on Monday is founder and managing director of Morgan Reach Accountants, Dr. Kamran Sheikh. So you can tune in to find out how to manage your business expenses. And a little reminder that if you need any more advice, join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. It's been absolutely fantastic answering your questions this morning. Thank you so much to everyone who engaged with me, and I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you.